And we're live. Welcome back to the Doomer Bloomer podcast with Will Nemo. We are talking about the hero's journey, the 12-step framework for life, success in business and relationships. We're talking to people on their life's journey, how their life has been affected or not affected, going from a doomer mindset to a bloomer mindset. Today on the show, we have Valerie Simon. That's how you pronounce it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. And where are you coming from today, Valerie? Where
I'm
are you?
coming from Silverthorne, Colorado, a small mountain
Okay.
town.
Did, did you grow up there or are you just hanging out?
Oh,
All right, can you hear me?
it's
Did you gr-
pausing a bit.
Oh yeah, did you grow up there or are you just hanging out there right now?
I did and I didn't. I grew up between Morrison, Colorado and Silverthorne, Colorado. Like we had a mountain house and kind of a house where I just really went to school for the most part in that area. So Silverthorne is like our forest getaway.
Nice. Yeah, I grew up in the woods as well, so I can kind of relate, small town living at its best. So, the reason I invited you on the podcast is I wanted to hear more about your hero's journey, potentially your doomer to bloomer path. Tell us a little bit briefly about your story, Valerie.
Well, I grew up in Colorado. When I was 18, I moved from here to Vancouver, British Columbia, to go to university. And it was really my first time stepping outside of everything I knew. I didn't know anyone in Vancouver, but what I really wanted to do was be at a good university and also be in a film industry because I've been acting on film since I was like 13. And yeah, from there, I was also exploring my consciousness via substances just out of curiosity. So it was a really wild time in the sense that I was just put in an environment where I was away from all of my identification factors. And it was also really lonely, just in the sense that when I went back to my hometown, nobody really knew me because I had changed so much. But also, I had a difficult time really connecting with people in a new city because when you kind of grow up in a small town, you don't know how to make friends outside of the people that you know. So it was an odd space to be because no one really knew me for who I was. And ironically, that was something that I wanted at one point in time. I just didn't want anybody to know me. But yeah, quickly that bit me in the ass, and I learned how to really connect through networking and just really putting myself into the film industry and dedicating my life to that. And philosophy and all the consciousness exploration just ended up becoming one thing. And I trained as a screenwriter, which also enhanced all of that put together as well. So So yeah, then down the road, I started traveling more. I've traveled the world and it's just all kind of come together into what is now. And I'm really fascinated by human nature and the mind and really just like the shadows of the mind that we don't really know about or are uncomfortable with kind of looking at.
Okay.
Yeah.
Segueing here a little bit because I did read your essay this morning on Substack in
Which one?
your one on psychedelic use.
Mm.
Um, and not and not just the potential mind opening effects, but the negative rabbit holes that people can go down. Because I have several videos about that as well, about the precautionary tale that my life took in 2019 and 2020.
Mhm.
Because what I gathered from your essay, and I'm not going to try to butcher it here or anything, but the essence of the essay was, go ahead and try these things, but be forewarned that the mindset and the life and your thinking that you bring to the experience is going to color your experience. You're not going to guess necessarily get the experience that you want. You're going to get the experience that you need, whether that be
Yeah.
good, bad, or ugly, right?
Oh
And
my God, yeah.
it's not all good. It's not all sugar plum fairies and rainbows and that sort of vibe. And as you alluded to in the essay, is we're introduced to this in a very taboo way, right? It's psychedelics are just starting to come out of the closet in the last, 7 years, really. Colorado has some relaxed laws. British Columbia has some more relaxed laws around it, right? Decriminalization, because we're looking at also the mental health benefits, for psilocybin for depression and MDMA for post traumatic stress, and it's a completely evolving field. So I kind of want to go. I'm going to poke you a little bit.
Hmm.
You
Do
know,
it.
you're so you traveled from small town Colorado, went to university at UBC, right,
Hmm.
in Vancouver,
Yep.
and Vancouver's a tough city. I tried to live there in 2009, 2010, and that was before the Olympics, right? So after the Olympics, the vibe really changed hard. It became more internationally recognized. A lot of international foreign money came into the city. It's expensive to live there.
Hmm.
And I called it no fun city, but it's got some really cool it's got to have some really cool neighborhoods like Kitsilano and the
Yeah.
whole vibe along the university endowment lands. Um,
Yeah.
but so just paint me a bit of a word picture. Your initial, I don't want to say shell shock, but your initial culture
Hmm.
shock, um, from going from a small pond, because that's my experience too, going from a small
Yep.
pond where people know who you are, people wave to each other in the grocery store, to Vancouver where you couldn't even get someone to say hello to you on the SkyTrain if you tried, in most
Yeah.
instances, right? And then of course your journey into psychedelics or entheogens, that's another name for it.
Hmm. Yeah.
And how that went from a positive experience, because it's initially usually fairly positive initial experience,
Yeah. Hmm.
until you start, like you said, psychedelics aren't inherently addictive, but the
Hmm.
experience can become addictive. That's what the essay kind of alluded to.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I really like your interpretation of my essay. So I started experimenting with psychedelics back in Colorado. And in Denver, there's this underground rave scene which is really spread out across North America. Like I know it's in British Columbia too. I stopped raving in when I was in Vancouver just because they're more like drum and bass and I didn't appreciate it at the time. Now I appreciate it more. But but yeah, back then when I was 18, I was so picky just because I was kind of stuck in that small town mentality of Denver. But yeah, I think it, I was introduced to psychedelics in a very like loving way. Just it was through a conversation and I originally wanted to just do it with, you know, people that were very close to me, soul sister wise type close to me. And I originally thought I was kind of doing that. That was my original intention, but it just came to be where, I was so in love with the experience that I wanted it again and again and again. And it was totally unconscious use. And I was really young, It's not that I was addicted. I've never been addicted to any substances before, but I I used spirituality as this kind of veil to give me an excuse to keep going into the world of psychedelics. And it was also including like MDMA and, just kind of just those substances that make you experience life times 10. I was really curious about them, and I think I loved the feeling of really exploring who I was in a heightened state. And it for sure really allowed me to get in touch with myself to a degree that I didn't know how to at the time. But probably after a year into experimenting, and I was also experimenting a bit in Vancouver with people that weren't as close with me. Like, I mean, they weren't as like close friends as I would have wanted to originally experience the whole psychedelic trip with. But but yeah, like after a year of experimenting, I started to get these subtle cues of like terror. Like I started having terrifying experiences, like feeling like I was going to die on acid, for example. Which I mean, a lot of people they talk about like ego death. I hear a lot of people say like, was it an ego death or were you actually dying? And to me, it doesn't feel like there's much of a difference, really. Like, life is about having an ego. Like, we're individuals. We're here, like, in a body. We're here having a unique individual experience. And I think when you feel like you're dying and you get terrified of it, it's just such a clear indicator that you're not ready to die and you're totally being irresponsible with your life. So, I mean, it took me a few times to really get the message, and each time that I didn't get the message, the worse and worse and worse the cues got. That it was like, why are you, you know, it was as if like the the entheogens were just like asking me why exactly I keep doing the drugs, like why do I keep going into these experiences? And it was it was originally intended to just be a spiritual introspective experience, and of course I would have liked to think that every time I was doing it, it was for that purpose. It was to connect with the people that I was around, like, a lot more deeply. But, I mean, because the experiences were getting so dark, there was an indicator there that there was just something that I was overlooking, and I was just overindulging. And I like not a lot of people don't like to talk about it on the internet because as great as they are, and I do really respect psychedelics and I expect the whole introspective psychedelic experience, it can definitely be overindulged on and unconsciously used. Not every psychedelic experience is a medicinal, spiritually awakening experience. I mean, actually, you can argue that they all are, but if you're not listening to your experiences and like actually taking the lessons for what they are each time you are going into a psychedelic experience, like you're not using them to learn anything. You're using them for the physical experience. So it becomes less of a non-physical, spiritually enlightening experience. It becomes more of an experience to just enhance your five senses. So, yeah. but Vancouver, to answer the second part, Vancouver, because it's such a gray it's such a gray city. It was
Hmm.
really difficult to get used to the rain. So really, like, my first few years there, I was so depressed. It was like the most depressing time of my life, really.
That's what you're talking about is what Terence McKenna calls once you get the message, hang up the phone.
Yeah.
Uh, and that was my impression of Vancouver too. I had a very difficult time in the wintertime with 5 months of rain.
It's 9
Um,
months.
well, I'm trying not I'm trying to be unbiased here. Uh,
Okay.
and there's really no judgments. I mean, the a lot of the community of the Doomer Bloomers and a lot of the audience have had probably similar experiences to you. I'm not sure if you're aware of my experience or not, but I'm just going to fill you in, and I'm just going to remind the audience that my experiences with psychedelics culminated from about 2015 into 2018 with a music festival called Shambhala. And
Mhm.
then ultimately in 2019 and then 2020 spring thereof, I was hospitalized, right? So that's how far and how fast things can fall from the fall of 2019 through the winter of 20 into the spring of 2020. But I also unfortunately had a lot of bad actors around me, what I call pushers, people who like they didn't really have my best interest in mind.
Yeah.
I've since split ties with a lot of those people. I've kind of gotten back onto my own journey, my own spiritual rebirth, if you will, my own physical
Yeah.
rebirth, if you will. But I do put out that cautionary tale that psychedelics aren't for everybody. And for myself personally, I really just kind of stick to psilocybin right now,
Mhm.
and not in the amounts that I used to do, because I've gotten I've gotten wise, or more sageness, into the equation, you know. And I know my limits, and I try to play within them. And
Yeah.
I don't ever do them in party settings anymore, and I don't ever really do them around people I don't know anymore.
Yeah.
I kind of just do them for my own introspection when I want to get some clarity on some issues occasionally. Um,
Mhm.
you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Well, I mean, I think, unfortunately, that's how a lot of us are introduced to drugs. And I'm going to put psychedelics in the category of drugs because I consider them drugs. I think a lot of the psychedelic community doesn't want to consider them as drugs because when people think drugs, they think of like heroin and meth and stuff. But I mean, I think anything that puts you in an altered state of consciousness is a drug. It depends on how you use it and what your intention is using it. And yeah, like with psychedelics, for example, music festivals, it's really hard to not be on drugs at music festivals. And that's where I was introduced to them as well. And it, you know, I'm not saying like to not take psychedelics at a music festival or anything. In fact, in my essay, I say like we really have the choice to take them however, whenever we want. Like there's really no shame in how you choose to take them. Even if you want to take them just to enhance your five senses, that go ahead and do that. And if you want to take it to have a spiritual rebirth, like that's just as valid too. But I think it's just the intention and awareness of why you are choosing to go into an altered state of consciousness is really what my whole essay was really challenging people on. So, yeah, party settings, like right now, I'd say I I'm kind of over the psychedelic experience. Like, yeah, I mean, I've microdosed like maybe 2 years ago was might have been my last microdose, but for me, it wasn't like I had to just like cold turkey quit doing anything. It was more just like it was more just like I just wanted to kind of be with myself like in this state again for the most part because this is when I feel most clear-minded. Like I can think clearly, I have most control over my thoughts. I feel in my body. I don't feel like I'm dying. Like I love sobriety. It's just where I feel most myself fully. But I mean, that doesn't mean I wouldn't take it at a music festival if I went again, you know? Like my view is very nuanced is what I'm ultimately saying. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I think sobriety ultimately is the ultimate reality. And if you can get the same experience through meditation and other practices, why wouldn't you want to do that? That's just my 10
Yeah.
cents or 2 cents.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if life in itself isn't already as intense of a psychedelic trip as it gets, then I mean, what exactly is the purpose of going into an altered state like always, constantly, you know? I mean, it like I think science right now, at least the last psychedelic convention I went to, they were saying that there's no evidence that it does any harm to the brain. But I mean, even while I was in a psychedelic trip, I really deeply questioned that one time and was like, there's no way this can't do harm to your brain. Like, I mean, for example, like take LSD, for example. I mean, like colors are just dripping off of everything. Like, how can that not be happening to your brain? Like, you know, like something is happening in your brain that is probably not the healthiest, you know? So, yeah, that's why, like, I think like once a year, maybe even once every few years for me is like probably good at this point.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm living testament that you can't. Yeah. Anyways, yeah. I'm yeah. I'm good as well.
Yeah.
Um. So kind of switching a little bit of gears here. Um. Besides the psychedelic experience in Vancouver, what did you go to school for? What do you base your career around, or what makes Valerie tick? Like, what makes you get up in the morning and want to be alive and live that experience?
I went to school for intercultural philosophy, really. It was a interdisciplinary program that I was in. So I was able to it was technically called religion, literature, and the arts. I think they changed the name of the program, but it allowed me to study both Asian and German continental philosophy. So I just combined those studies and I applied it to my craft of acting actually. So acting has always been a really huge important part of my life. In fact, I'd say acting is like a super psychedelic experience for me. But yeah, gradually, because I just have such a vivid imagination, it all ended up turning into stories. So screenwriting became a really big part of what I do. And I love writing psychological thrillers. So that's really what I live for.
So, would you say you're more on the acting side now, or more on the writing side, or like half and half, or 60-40?
They're both even. I mean, right now I'm focusing on writing longer movies. I really want to I'm really working at getting my first independent feature film off the ground. So that's really like my main project that I'm working on at the moment. Essays are kind of an intuitive, like really natural thing for me to do. So that's why like I'm constantly writing essays. It's this form of self-expression. It also helps me get my thoughts in order. But yeah, the screenwriting and acting are both hand in hand. They're both equal.
Okay, so those are independent of of your like official interdisciplinary studies.
Yeah, I mean, like I kind of looked at school as an expensive hobby, whereas my real career was outside of school, just doing my film stuff. But I mean, school, like everything that I learned in school really played into a lot of what I do still. So like my influences from the Tao Te Ching or, reading Nietzsche and all these philosophers, they've had an impact on how I interpret life. So my essays are kind of a testament for that.
Right on. So I'm going to ask you this big question in the middle here.
Okay.
What is your biggest failure and what did you learn from it?
And what did I learn from what?
Well, what did you learn from said failure? Like cuz we're that's what life is. It's a set of constant failures until you hit on a formula that works for you.
Yeah.
And I'm not
Oh
saying you
shit.
have to, right? Do you want me to like
No, I was thinking about this today actually because mm, I feel like I've like moved the needle. I don't know how much I've moved the needle at this point. Like, I mean, I know I'm still kind of in the really early phases of my life, but I mean, everything has been a failure for the most part at least public wise. I think I'm still learning how to find a system of like constant success. I think the consistent success that I see is really like behind closed doors. Like for example, finishing screenplays and doing work as an actor, it's not fully public at the moment. I think anything public right now has kind of been a public display of my failures, for example. So so yeah, I think right now for me the the thing that I just keep in mind is maintaining my state of inner peace. Like I'm not trying to get attached to this whole idea of success that I created in my own mind. So,
that's very Tao of you.
yeah, I'd say so too.
Yeah, I mean, you wrote something a little different here, but you pretty much nailed it. I personally think that life is just a series of successive failures, and you just get better and faster at failing.
Mhm.
And like I don't ever really, I don't know, like it's hard to say when you've made it. Like is it a certain number? Is it a certain is it the feature film that you get onto the Toronto Film Festival? Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, and like you said, you still have a lot of career life ahead. So it's not like, fail faster, fail
Mhm.
stronger. But what advice would you give to someone wanting to pursue a career or a path similar to yours?
Mm. Yeah. Well, a lot of my career has been looking at Hollywood because innately film actors have to think of Hollywood and innately actors are actors love being center of stage, you know. You can't be an actor without wanting attention in some regard. But I'd say when you're going about a career that heavily involves Hollywood, you can't look at Hollywood as the path to success. I think Hollywood is a really good kind of goalpost or idolized trophy to keep in mind. But there's no correct path to do anything. Like, and I learned this like really early on actually because it's like academia. Like everything we've learned to do is heavily corporatized and it looks like a straightforward career path. Like everything, even when you're an actor, they tell you to get your headshots, get an agent, go out for auditions, keep trying, keep trying, keep trying, keep doing the same thing, and then eventually you'll land a role. And it's really not that simple. I mean, you have to be creative and do multiple things to make yourself a unique brand. So I kind of think the idea of mastering just one thing isn't fully possible if you want to be a master at your craft. Like you have to have a wide range of skills and glue them all together and then continue reiterating after every single failure. So everything that I'm doing right now, for example, like I mean I just said every like my public display of failures is out there in the open for everyone to see. But I mean every single thing that I've done has had some kind of iteration to it. And it's been a unique culmination of skills just put in a different way based on what I've learned from the previous failure. So there's no one corporatized way to success. There's a vast array of things you can do.
And oddly enough, you know, someone else I had on this podcast, his name is Mike Messier. He's also an actor and a screenwriter,
Mm,
and
mm,
he's written novellas. But you know what he's doing right now is he's actually doing art. So what you're kind of saying in a roundabout way is acting is entrepreneurship, and
for sure.
entrepreneurship is acting. And
Oh yeah.
I really feel that myself, because if I was to put myself into a box, because I don't really put myself into any box per se,
Yeah.
but I would call myself entrepreneurial.
Mm,
Mm, and that's, I think that's what you're saying is it's a culmination of, you got to know how to have some business acumen, you need to know how to network with people,
mhm.
and like you said, selling yourself, sales and marketing is pretty much
Yeah.
um the a really big piece of the puzzle, building that
Yeah, totally.
brand essence, you know.
Well,
Jump in here.
that's why people get into that whole starving artist mindset because I mean, it's not just about the art. Like, for example, the art is probably like I want to say okay, it's really important to be good at your craft. So like you need to have confidence in your craft, but I mean, it's like not learning the business side of your craft is like it's like learning how to write sentences but not knowing how to write a paragraph. You know, like you're missing a fundamental piece of your art, like of creating the craft that you want to make. So yeah, I think entrepreneurs too are creative people. It's just it's using creativity where you need to use it. So it's not just about, like being good at your artsy type of stuff, the fun stuff, but like the so-called boring stuff is it needs the creative skill as well. So,
Well, and I don't know how much, like, personally, for myself, I don't know how much you feel it, or but like I feel a lot of the time we've reached a point of information overload on a lot of stuff. um
mhm,
and what I've had to realize is that I needed to take a step back and say, what am I good at and what am I not so good at? And what can I outsource to other people? Or what can I outsource to a software program? Um, it's just, it's a matter of figuring out your strengths and playing to your strengths rather than trying to pad your weaknesses as much, I think.
Mhm.
You know, and it's just, I mean, you're kind of in a different field, but tangential. I don't even know what field I'm in. I'm a little a bit of everything. I'm pretty anti-disciplinarian as well, to be honest. But what were three of the best resources that have helped you along said path or along the way?
Mm, the 3 resources. I'd say one resource was my first acting teacher in Vancouver. She taught me how to act intuitively and basically changed my entire perception of acting. Her name is Shay Hampton. My second one would be my screenwriting teacher. Her name is Linda Aronson. She fucking taught me how to write. Like I had never like in just in so many different dimensions. Like I mean, she yelled at me one time. Like she didn't like yell at me, but she had a serious conversation with me about my priorities and it was just I just feel like she was a true mentor in my life, not just at a screenwriter level, but just in terms of work ethic. I don't miss a day of screenwriting because of everything she's taught me. So I write daily because of her and her wisdom. And then third, resource. Could you use your like could I say like my emotions as a
Sure.
resource?
That could be, that could be a resource if you feel it's a resource.
I feel like it is because I think the more I got in touch with my emotions, I was able to fine tune my intuition to a degree that is just beyond what I ever like knew I was capable of. So, my emotions, I pay really close attention to them.
Right on. And if you could step into my shoes as an interviewer, what would you have asked yourself that I didn't already?
Mm, I'm probably gonna forget what I thought about
Do you want me to
before.
cue it up here?
Sure, cue it.
You wrote as how does learning relationship skills help you with achieving your career goals?
Oh, yeah, there we go. Okay, so how does learning relationship skills help your career grow?
Well, how has it helped you?
Okay, so I feel like relationships, particularly romantic relationships, teach you everything to learn about life. Like, the that as above, so below principle. Just the extent to which you need to use both your logical mind and your emotional brain to understand what you are getting yourself into at all times and also navigate people and the kind of games they play and also how you choose to be in certain situations and how choosing to be authentically yourself regardless of what other people think about you changes the trajectory of your life. It just plays such an important role in, everything. So, I feel like if you want to do well in business, you should date.
Oh, but don't mix business and pleasure or what?
I no, business can be pleasurable, but I guess I should I shouldn't say this too literally, but like dating is just metaphorical to career. Like meeting for example, if you really want what's best for yourself, then you need to show up as that best version of yourself that has the thing that you really want. So, I mean, learning skills on how to get to know people on a certain level, whether it be romantic or business related, it's it's really very similar. Doing business with people is really similar to marriage. Like, there's contracts, there's shared bank accounts, and a lot of the times, if you're not careful about who you choose as a business partner, everything can just go to hell, and that's really what happened with my last project. It was the closest I got to bringing, like, a movie up off the ground, and I was just at the time, I didn't really pay the closest attention to the red flags, and then ultimately it didn't work out. And I guess the same goes for romantic relationships. It's like every single step of the way, you just need to be highly attuned to yourself because the extent to which you're attuned to how you feel, like how confident you feel in your relationships, who you're working with, or who you are romantically involving yourself with, the better you can be attuned to them. And it's just having really unconditional trust in yourself. It elevates every single kind of relationship that you get into. So, yeah, that's why I think dating teaches you business.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily 100% agree.
Why
There's
don't you
def
agree?
I don't really want to get into it,
Okay.
but I think it really what you said is choosing the right partner, right, and doing the due
Mhm.
diligence. So what I agree with is any sort of relationship, partnership, or romantic or otherwise, there's a due diligence period, right? And people present themselves like this is the biggest thing that I've like the biggest cravat or like I would say is like people present themselves as something other during the honeymoon phase of things,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And but for how long can they persist in the honeymoon phase? Well, that depends on the person, right? Some people can be very deceptive for long periods of time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think
I personally couldn't. I
mhm.
just don't have the energy. But
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's the thing. It that's why it boils down to self-awareness. Like, you need to be aware of what is going on within yourself emotionally when it comes to your relationships and, what you want to get out of those relationships. So, like, you have to be aware of whether you yourself are projecting or not. It's like it's a constant game of identifying the truth within yourself so that you can just utterly and completely be committed to the truth as it is outside of yourself. So,
I could stomach that one. That would make sense.
okay.
Uh, how can a doomer start to get on the path of becoming a bloomer in life, business, relationships? What would be your best advice to someone who's in a bit of a dark place and would want to maybe start to get on a path to something better in their life?
Mm, I would stay committed to the truth and only the truth. So, I mean, I say reality is my religion. Like, I just always want to be connected to reality. Like, even if it's a hard pill to swallow, even if admitting something to myself might hurt my ego, or just admitting that I'm in a bad place in general. I think as long as you're committed to reality and being radically honest and accepting of the current state of the situation, then it's much more smooth sailing to get through from there. I forget if that's what I mentioned in the thing, but
You wrote be your full self, or you wrote listen to every single detail of feeling that arises for you It tells you everything you need to know and lets you in on everything you need to do to live a successful life. So in essence, yes.
Mm, yeah, okay.
And then, yeah, you kind of wrote the same. How can you be of service to your community and the world? And you're familiar with verse 17, I imagine.
I don't know if I am. I don't have the memory at the moment of verse
Well,
17.
essentially, verse 7 says is how to live life as an enlightened leader. And as the Tao says, as an enlightened leader, you have to take a step back and allow people to live their essential natures and not interfere. It's leadership by non-interference. That's
Mm,
the
yeah.
essential verse.
Well, I mean, essentially, coercion, for the most part, doesn't work. And can you remind me of the question, the original question?
The original question is how can you be of service to your community and the world?
I think admitting that you don't know everything.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. Being open to being wrong.
Yeah, holy 100%. Uh, lastly, here, where can listeners connect with you online via your coaching link, online website, or social media handles? This is your
Yeah.
time to plug yourself.
So everything is Empty by Valerie, empty with an I at the end,
Mm-hmm.
on all my social handles. And if you want to check out the website, it's emptyofficial.com. Empty with an I. So,
And empty.substack.com as well.
yep, empty.substack is my Substack.
Yes, definitely encourage you to check that one out. Very thought provoking. At least I get a lot out of it, out of the myriad of substacks that I follow. Um, so, what else was I going to say here? Yeah, so very thought provoking. You can tell by your, by your demeanor, you're a very deep thinker, very intuitive, in tune with yourself, reality. Is there anything else you want to say before I do the sign off here?
I think we got it all. Thank you
Okay,
so much for your kind words.
you're welcome. I live my life through kindness. I try to as much as I can.
Oh, that's a great way to live your life. I'm on board with that.
All right. Well, wrapping up here. This has been the Doomer Bloomer podcast with Will Nemo. As you know, we have multiple different handles out there, but if you want to get in touch with the Doomer Bloomer podcast and the Doomer Bloomer crew, hit me up at Doomer Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. I don't have a TikTok for Doomer Bloomers. Sorry guys. I'm not going down that road again. As always, keep your stick on the ice. Live to your own essential natures, Tao Te Ching style. Be true to yourself and remember to have fun along the way. Namaste from Will Nemo. Cheers.